Good day. My name is Chuck Dick. I have the privilege of being a co-chair of the programming committee for California Arbitration, and I am this morning serving as a moderator for an interview with one of the up-and-coming players in California arbitration scene, a person who's taking on increasingly important roles within Cal Arb, and I'm pleased to introduce you this morning to Brody Greenwald, a partner with White and Case in Los Angeles. And I know that the next few minutes we're going to have to share with each other will be a very interesting opportunity to learn a little bit more about a very interesting man. But Brody, I understand you're a California native, but you've spent most of your professional life on east of the Mississippi River. Tell me a little bit about that and how you ended up migrating back here.
Yeah, that's right. Chuck, thank you for having me. It's really a privilege to be part of these California conversations and to sit down with you. I think this is great what you're doing for California arbitration, for the community and for the organization Cal Arb. So thank you for having me. You're right. I did start my career back east. I went to school back east at Duke, and I went to law school in Chicago, and from there went to Washington, D.C. Joined White and Case out of law school. Didn't know actually anything about international arbitration at the time. It wasn't that long ago, but back when I started, we weren't taking international arbitration classes in most law schools, at least not in mine. I know that some schools like GW and Columbia had that, but when I went to White and Case, I interviewed with our commercial litigation team and was looking to do mostly antitrust litigation and some securities litigation. We have a big antitrust litigation team in our Washington office with really world-class litigators. And I got into international arbitration in a bit of a roundabout way. Our hiring partner at the time is the head of our group and really one of the, I would say, leading lights in the entire world at international arbitration, Abby Cohen-Smutney. She's also an alum of University of Chicago Law School, like I am, and she called me up and said, "Hey, I have this really interesting project about this investor-state arbitration, and could you do a little work for me on that?" And I did, and I ended up working on that matter with her over the course of my first 2 years at the firm, while doing some white-collar criminal investigations and some litigation work. And I just fell in love with the practice and continued on with it. And it's been now the focus of my career for almost the past 20 years now. And I feel really privileged to be part of the arbitration community. I had a sense, even as I moved back to Washington when I started my career, that someday I might be lucky enough to come back to California. I took the California bar straight out of law school and then waved into DC, and took a little while. I spent about 15 years in Washington, but was really fortunate to find the opportunity to come back here 4 years ago.
Well, you say you started out in a traditional sort of litigation practice that then transitions into what you described. But I'd be interested in having you do a little compare and contrast. And what was it about the arbitration scene that was more appealing to you?
I think, what I talk about this a lot with students and with younger lawyers, is you just have to find the right fit for you. And so it wasn't that one practice was better or more appealing than the others. I actually loved the litigation practice and litigation work that I was doing. I also really enjoyed the investigations work that I was doing with the white collar team. But I think you have to find the right group of people who you want to work with and what's exciting to you. And that first arbitration case I did, it was actually quite a well-known case. It's called EDF versus Romania. And it had just so many interesting issues. The core issue in that case was a claim by the claimants that their investment was taken away from them when they refused to pay a $2.5 million bribe request to two officials in the Prime Minister's cabinet. And so we were at the time representing the state in that arbitration and defending against those allegations. And it brought kind of everything I was interested in together. There were these aspects of criminal law issues and these serious allegations of corruption, very serious allegations. There was the investment and how this process came to be and how it performed over time, and the international law element of it. There was a lot of fun travel, met some incredible local counsel in Romania who I actually have had the opportunity to work with over the course of 2 decades on a number of different matters. But that case, we were working with experts that included digital forensic experts. We had a former FBI expert who was listening to an audio file that was produced to us 12 days before the oral hearing in the case, which ended up, the other side claimed it was an audio recording of one of the bribe solicitations they claimed was made, that they had just received it 12 days before the hearing. This ended up canceling our hearing. We had an entire written phase about the admissibility of that audio file where we had this expert examine it. The expert was really one of the most renowned experts you could ever work with. He had examined the missing minutes to the Nixon audio files. He had examined the Zapruder film. So he was quite the unquestioned expert. And he said that in his entire career, he had never seen a file that was more manipulated than that file was. It was missing the beginning, it was missing the end, and it was not a tape recording, it was an audio file. And his testimony was that it was no different than a Microsoft Word document. You could cut and paste and move things around, and that there were dozens of these stops and starts where there had been tampering with the file. And so we ended up actually having that audio file thrown out as inadmissible evidence because it was withheld in bad faith until 12 days before the hearing to gain procedural surprise. It was made in violation of law because there was no dual party consent to the recording, such as it was, and because it was not capable of being authenticated without the original recording equipment and the original tape. And so, and because of all of the manipulations of it. And so being able to do that and go through that experience and work with the experts we worked with, the corruption allegations were rejected, and we prevailed in that case. It was just an incredible experience for a first and second year associate. And to me, I said, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to keep working on these cases and working with this team. And I'm fortunate enough to be growing up at a place and now a partner for the last 8 years at a firm that is recognized by many as having one of the best, if not the best, international arbitration practices in the world. And it's allowed me to learn really from some legends of the industry as I've developed my own practice.
You just described for us a fascinating learning opportunity with investor state arbitration. But I also know you've done a lot of international commercial work, and I'd be interested in your observations of the differences between the two and whether you have a preference.
I think they're both really fascinating. And yes, we do a lot of international and commercial arbitration work. And I think that that's especially important out here in California because that really is the large majority of the types of disputes that you see out here. The elements are a little bit different because it's both are obviously governed. The fundamental concept is that you need consent. That's the cornerstone of any type of arbitration is consent to arbitration. I think what's a little different in the investor state sphere is that without the recourse to investor state arbitration that so many of these investment treaties, the thousands of them that have now proliferated over the last decades provide, there would be no recourse whatsoever to the investor to have a real chance at a fair and impartial hearing of their claims. And I think that that's what really separates investor state arbitration and why it's so important in avoiding the sort of gunboat diplomacy of the past, and that some fear we might be returning to at this moment. It's actually a very important moment in time, I think, for investor-state arbitration, where you've seen some retrenchment of it over the past years, and where it's become a political issue in different places, but especially here in the United States, with populist attacks on it from both sides, both parties, which was not the case even 5 or 10 years ago. I think it's critical to have that opportunity for an investor who has made a real investment in the economy of a foreign government, of a foreign state, to be able to present claims for the taking of their investment, or for arbitrary and unlawful action that negatively impacts their investment, to an arbitration tribunal that will be impartial, that will give them their fair shot at making their case, because otherwise they would be left to present those claims in the host state's courts, which would be an extremely difficult situation in so many countries around the world, and so I think it's a really important area of law, and one of the ones that I do really enjoy. But that's not to say, international commercial arbitration and the disputes that arise under those contracts are, I think, equally fascinating, and especially equally important to the parties to those contracts. Having their dispute heard in the forum of their choice is an essential part of doing those very important and very large international business transactions.
Well, one of the issues that we hear frequently discussed in conjunction with investment treaty arbitration is the recurring appointment of a given arbitrator who appears time and time again, which is less the custom and less the practice in commercial arbitration. I wonder what your experiences have been, and if you could muse just a little bit about the potential consequences of that.
Chuck, that is a great question, and I'm actually really glad you asked it, because I do think it's part of what has given rise to criticism and doubts about the system and the integrity of it, and the legitimacy of it. And there are two issues that commonly come up in this type of discussion. One is what's called double hatting, where arbitrators are not only sitting as arbitrators in many cases, but they're also acting as counsel in the same types of cases, as part of their own legal practice. And that raises concerns, because you could have a situation where in one case you're acting as counsel for a client, and in another case you could potentially take a decision that, although there's not stare decisis in international arbitration and decisions are not binding from one case to the next, there is a body of jurisprudence, and tribunals do look at decisions of other tribunals and try to have consistent results. And so you could have someone sitting in judgment in one case making a decision that could potentially be beneficial to a client in another case. And that is a real problem, and it's also a perceived problem, but it's not an easy one to solve. And the reason for it is this: to get to your other point about how the same people try to, seem to get appointed over and over and over again, the obstacle to bringing in new people as arbitrators in these investor state cases is that most people, unless you have a huge name, would not get enough appointments to be able to sustain themselves solely on their arbitrator practice. They need to break in as arbitrators to be practicing attorneys and to continue to do that work. And so it's not a simple solution to say you can't, sit in one type of case and preside in another type of case. And there have been attempts to address this through the IBA and its guidelines on conflicts of interest, to say when it's too close or when it crosses a line. But it is a very thorny and complicated issue. The other is that there is an ideological aspect that is very unfortunate, where there are just some arbitrators who are going to side with one side or the other based on a track record of consistently favoring either the respondent sovereign state or the claimant investor. And so you don't necessarily feel like you have three tribunal members who are there and capable of exercising independent and impartial judgment. It almost feels like you have often a very dogmatic arbitrator on both wings, especially on, I would say, some of the state appointed arbitrators. And then you're in the hands of the chair, and you hope that you get a fair appointee as chair. Very often there's not going to be agreement about who the chair of the tribunal is, and so you find yourself in the hands of the appointing authority.
Let me shift gears a bit. I know that in your past you have been a lecturer at Duke in a law school, and I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about that experience, how you reacted and enjoyed the teaching opportunity, and your interaction with students, and how that was a rich and valuable experience.
Duke's a special place in my heart. I love Duke. And so the opportunity to go back every year is one that I'm always grateful for. I started teaching there at the law school with one of my colleagues, senior associate in our practice back, I think in 2018 or 2019, perhaps. And it's nice because it's a 2-day class. So it's not an ongoing lecture series over the course of the semester that could be challenging at different times to balance with the schedule of running a practice. But Duke has what they call a winter session. So after the fall semester ends and before the spring semester resumes, they take a week where they offer a number of different courses that are taught by practitioners or sometimes judges on different areas of law. And the courses are 2 days, and they're 1 credit instead of 3 or 4, or whatever a standard course would be. And so I started teaching this class, and it's on international arbitration. We do an overview, it's 3 hours on the first day, of the different types of arbitration, really running through the different jurisdictional issues and the claims and defenses in investor state arbitration. We use real cases that we talk about to present to them on these different issues. And then when we reconvene the second day for another 3 hours, we take other cases and we anonymize them. So we just give them the fact pattern, we give them a treaty, and we ask, what issues based on this fact pattern would you raise if you were the defense counsel, if you were the respondent's counsel, what jurisdictional issues would you raise? If you were the claimant's counsel, what claims would you raise? On what basis? What defenses would the respondent raise in response to those claims? How do you think the case came out and why? And so they work through these in small groups, and then we spend the second half of the 3 hours allowing them to present to the class on how they answered those different questions. And then we tell them what really happened in those cases and why. So it's just a really fun opportunity to get to be on campus and interact with students. It also connects us to a great university that is important to our pipeline of talent here. So it's always good to meet students from Duke and see if they want to join White and Case.
I've heard it said that the teacher often learns more than the students as a consequence of the preparatory activities and then the interaction with and exchange of ideas with the students. Was that your experience?
It's a great point, definitely. And it's also helps you see what someone who has heard of what you do but may not have spent years focusing on it, or may just know a very little amount about it, what questions they have, what they consider to be the the fair outcome in these disputes, even if it's not necessarily the outcome that was reached, and can help you really think about issues. Some of the students also are LLMs and have themselves had distinguished practices in their own countries before coming to the US to earn a US degree. And so they have insights as well from how practices were in their own country, and those are always interesting to hear as well.
Brody, you mentioned that you went to law school at Chicago, where there was no curriculum in arbitration. And indeed, that was true across the country at the time that you were in school. Certainly, it has changed here in the last decade or so. But to what extent do you think that you were disadvantaged by not having that as part of your academic background?
I don't think I was disadvantaged. I think that school is obviously helpful to guide you, and I think it teaches you how to think through issues and how to think creatively, and how to use the law to build a case in the various disputes classes. Having those opportunities to talk through and think through problems with your classmates and with your professors is a great opportunity. And I think that everyone learns a lot in those 3 years, but there's nothing that can substitute for actually practicing. And I think that a lot of what you learn is from who's working with you and who you grow up under. So when you're a junior associate, who are the senior associates that you're working with? Who are the partners? And I just really had the opportunity to learn from some of the best, many of them still my colleagues at White & Case, some who went on to distinguished careers elsewhere, became head of the NAFTA division of the State Department, what used to be NAFTA. So just, I think that is really where you grow and learn the most. And so I don't feel like it was a loss, but I do think that today's students have such incredible opportunities. The Bismuth is one of the biggest opportunities, and law schools around the world compete in it. And there is probably now an international arbitration association or club in most law schools. And I've had the opportunity to go back to Chicago. I've gone to Harvard, talked about our experiences and different cases at those schools. And that wouldn't have happened when I was a student probably, but it's great that we can do that now. And I think that the students that come out today, they'll just know more when they start, and then hopefully will fall in love with practice when they join it. And if not, that they'll find something that does inspire them to have the best legal career they could have.
We began this conversation talking about the fact you are a Southern California native, and you've now obviously migrated back here. I'd like to go back and revisit that move on your part, why you made it at this particular juncture in your career, and tell us a little bit more about what your professional life has become now that you're back here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I love our LA office. It's really a great place, a really close-knit group of partners here. For me, it was always a dream to come back to California, and I was not necessarily sure for a while that would happen. I met someone who's an East Coaster from New York, and we had talked about maybe moving to New York. And to be honest, we were very happy in DC. There came a time, though, when it really made sense, both for us as a family, but also for the firm and for our practice. We have expanded over the years and opened up in the past, I would say 5 or 10 years, offices in Chicago, Boston, Houston. We have international arbitration lawyers in Miami. We have them in Houston. We obviously have big teams in New York and in DC. And it made sense to have a group out here doing international arbitration and being part of our team that really has people all over the world, from Paris to Stockholm to Geneva, and have someone in California too. And the reason for that is that California's economy, as you know, Chuck, is one of the biggest in the world. As a standalone economy, I think it would be top 5 in the world. We have such an incredible technology sector, but not only that, so many other very large industries here in California. And I think there was a sense, at least for us, that with California also positioned, as a hub to Asia Pacific and to Latin America, that there really could be an explosion of international disputes here in California and international arbitration. And I know that wasn't only our thinking. Sort of founding legends of our organization, like Gary Benton, had that idea before us, and really, a lot of people who are here in California, like yourself, have been pushing to increase opportunity and exposure for international arbitration here in California. So that was a big reason for the move. And I think what we've seen in even just the last couple of years is an exponential growth of interest in international arbitration. I see more practitioners coming to California at other firms. I see the growth in what started as California International Arbitration Week. It was really just a small event. Before that had been the JAMS USC Symposium for a number of years, but has grown into a huge event that we had this year in San Francisco for the entire week. Our first time being in San Francisco instead of in LA. And we had a week of great discussion, so many incredible panels. We combined that with a GAR Live event in San Francisco, the first GAR Live technology event, which was an all-day event that was really a great event, had so many interesting speakers. I was very lucky to be a part of that. And then the other big, I think, confirmation of our arrival is the incredible bid that was put together to host ICA, which many will know, but some may not, is the largest international arbitration conference. Takes place every 2 years. They have what's called an ICA Congress, and then they meet in their off year in another location. And the location of the Congress has changes every time, but it's never in the past been held on the West Coast of the Americas, and so obviously never been held before in California. And just an incredible team led by AAA ICDR, Steve Anderson, Bridget McCormick, and by California Arbitration, especially our current president, outgoing president, Dana Welch, together with Paul Cohen, but so many others, putting together a bid for ICA to be held here in California. And they, everyone saw all the same reasons we were already talking about, which is our incredible economy, our tech sector, all the industries we have here, the connection to the Asia Pacific and the Latin America disputes. And so ICA will be coming to California, to San Francisco in 2028. And I think it's going to be an incredible opportunity for all of us to really showcase what international arbitration in California is and what it could be and what we think it will be in the future.
Your enthusiastic description of the future of arbitration in California is encouraging for somebody who is coming out of law school, or at least at the early stages in their professional development, maybe still thinking a little bit about what they really want to focus on as their career unfolds. I just wonder if you had any words of wisdom you could share with somebody who's in that early stage of their professional development, and what kind of encouragement you would give them about this broad arena of commercial arbitration.
I think it's a great time to be coming into this field for the reasons we just talked about. And, there are a lot of firms, I think, who have some presence. And so the opportunities are greater than they were even a year or two ago. But I also think one thing that I experienced myself is there's so many, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, there's so many related disputes practices where even if your ideal opportunity, if you come out of law school thinking you really want to do international arbitration, you can't get that right away as a first year. Doing litigation here in the U.S., having a California license or maybe New York or somewhere else, and doing litigation or even investigations, anything else where you're researching the law, you're developing facts, meeting with witnesses, developing a case, telling a story, whether it's in a brief to a court or whether it's an investigative report that you submit to a client or to an investigative agency. All of those, I think, take the same skill sets. They take your legal research and writing skills, your ability to distill complex facts and law into a narrative. And there are just so many opportunities in those different fields around all over California or wherever you might be. So even if it doesn't happen right away, I think that persistence is ultimately what pays off. Develop your skill set, go somewhere that makes you happy, do something you're interested in, and eventually I think the opportunities do knock for you, like they did for me to come back here from DC to California. Like I said, we were very happy in DC and I had a great practice there, and I still work with my DC colleagues literally all the time, and with colleagues from all over the world. But being able to be here in California was a dream of mine, and it took 14, 15 years to make it happen. But I think you just have to keep at it, and the time will come.
What I think I just heard you describing is the role of advocacy, both oral and in writing. That is a skill set that is important for anybody who's going to be involved in the whole business of dispute resolution, whether it's in arbitration or in a courtroom, federal or state. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that what you're really instructing those who may be at this threshold of their career?
Absolutely. And, we don't necessarily, if we're looking for someone to join us, you're not looking necessarily for someone who has the exact same experience that we would be doing. I mean, that might be nice, but you want someone who, is smart. They can think through problems. They've handled they've handled complex disputes of some kind, gone through that battle, put together cases, and they can do that. And I think that those skills are very translatable, and they cut across different fields. And I tell that to our young associates all the time: get exposure and experience in whatever disputes practices we have. They will carry you forward, whatever you do and wherever you go in your career.
Brody, I personally am encouraged by listening to your enthusiastic description of the lay of the land here in California today in 2024. And it certainly has been not only my experience, but one that you've now just mirrored here personally and in your description of what is the future and what it holds for us. I really want to just thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning and to tell us a little bit about your own trajectory and how you arrived back home in California. We're delighted to have you here among us, building the future of commercial arbitration in this state. But most importantly, I'm just delighted that I got a chance to get to know you a little bit better and to share your resume with the viewers of this program, California Conversations. Thanks again for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, Chuck. It was really a pleasure and a privilege to be here and to talk with you. You've done such an incredible job organizing this, so thank you for including me and for having me on your program.
You're most welcome. The pleasure was ours.
Thank you.